Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Today I want to talk about 5 dangerous lies that are pretty rampant in the spiritual community, usually perpetuated by these spiritual gurus. And as you'll see with each of these, there's always a seed of truth in these beliefs. It's only when they're taken to an extreme that they can become pretty psychologically and physically deleterious. I'm Anna Yudin, I'm a doctor of clinical psychology and also a fiction author. Check out my debut novel, The Curse in Their Veins. It's a great cozy read this time of year, and let's get started. Dangerous lie number 1. Painful emotions are toxic and will kill you. There's this notion that negative emotions, more on that in a second, and stress in particular, will trigger disease and ultimately kill you. That people who experience a lot of these negative emotions have a lower vibration or frequency, and that all cancer, all disease, everything bad in life is just caused by stress. And you can actually live to be immortal if you're always just high vibration. Now, here's the seed of truth. Some forms of stress do indeed contribute to illness, can trigger illness epigenetically, as well as other negative outcomes. And negative outlooks like pessimism, which are a huge component of painful emotions, are associated with lower mortality in both healthy and sick people. So that is the seed of truth, that yes, stress and experiencing painful emotions can definitely trigger some negative outcomes, certain kinds of stress. But we also have a ton of really high quality research to suggest that it's not stress itself that causes illness. It's the way we think about and manage our stress. I go into this in a lot more depth in my video on Kelly McGonigal's video, The Upside of Stress, so check that out if you haven't yet. So that's about stress. But when it comes to emotions, there is no such thing as a positive or negative emotion. There are only pleasant and painful emotions, but absolutely all emotions are there for your survival. They are messengers there to help you survive. For example, feeling sad signals to you that you've lost something important to you. Feeling angry signals to you that some injustice has occurred that needs resolving. Even the painful emotions help us survive and help us move forward from difficult experiences. And in fact, avoiding these painful emotions can do more harm, a lot more harm, than feeling them and allowing ourselves to process through them. Why this lie is so dangerous? First of all, it can trigger obsessions and self-blame when you feel a painful emotion. I'm a person who is prone to obsessive thinking, and I remember a couple years ago after I read this spiritual self-help book that touted this message that certain emotions are toxic and will kill you, I used to feel so guilty anytime I felt anxious. And I used to obsess thinking about all the different biological processes that must be currently contributing to illness in my body because I was feeling anxious. Every time I would feel anxiety in particular, I would feel guilty. I would feel like, oh my God, this is going to kill me. And ironically, that kind of outlook where you've been programmed to think that all stress is bad, all painful emotions are bad, sets you up to be more vulnerable to the negative consequences of stress. Because like I mentioned in that video on the upside of stress, when you take a healthy approach towards stress, a resilient approach, and you use it to motivate you and to move forward in stronger ways, you actually fare a lot better than most people. And another reason why this lie is so dangerous is that it impedes you from using your emotions as messengers and as tools, basically creating these like stagnant, toxic positivity bots who are too afraid to stroll into their emotional underworld, into the parts of their selves that can be painful. So please allow me to reassure you. Feeling painful emotions does not mean you are going to induce illness. It doesn't make you less high vibration. Emotions are not toxic. All of them are valuable, and they're there to actually protect us. How we interact with those emotions is what can become toxic or adaptive. Dangerous lie number 2. God is speaking through you. You'll often hear spiritual gurus and cult leaders, let's be honest, claiming that God speaks to them or speaks through them, tells them what to do and so forth. Sometimes even just as a way of justifying the most ridiculous things like buying a luxury car. Or sometimes more serious things like hurting people. I have nothing against people who believe in a higher power, but when I've observed people claim that God is speaking through them, it's usually a huge cause of concern for a number of reasons. One is that it can be a sign of religious delusions, which is a component of disorders that fall on the schizophrenia schizotypy spectrum, such as schizophrenia. The spiritual guru to spiritual psychosis pipeline is unfortunately alive and well, but that's pretty rare. More commonly, I find that people who say God is speaking to them or through them are actually just looking to externalize responsibility for their desires and their thoughts, or are maybe just struggling to make sense of a figure that they've introjected. This might sound like a lot of psychological mumbo jumbo, so let me break it down what this means exactly. Externalizing responsibility for your thoughts or desires is when you can't accept this is what I want or this is what I believe. So it's easier for you to say, God wants me to have this luxury car to reward me for my karmic goodness. You're projecting your own desires onto an external God figure, or what should be an external God figure when religious beliefs are healthy. And also you're making your desires seem holy by definition, which makes them exempt from criticism. Convenient how that works, right? Other times, people who claim God is speaking through them are struggling to make sense of a figure they've introjected. So introjection is when you take an external figure or personification or whatever you want to call it, and you absorb it into part of yourself. So for example, when you go to therapy, let's say you're very self-critical, your therapist starts to challenge that self-critical voice, and eventually you introject the therapist's voice and you become a more compassionate person in a similar way to how they speak to you. And you can introject the good, benevolent God in a similar way that you can introject anyone's voice. You can do it in healthy ways, or you can do it in unhealthy ways. So when a person says, God wants me to have this luxury car, it can sometimes be because they've absorbed this God personification into their own personality. And ultimately it comes down to poor self-other differentiation. They struggle to differentiate between their internal self and the external world, which you might call ego dissolution, but we might also call psychosis. They basically see themselves as God now. And this is exactly the type of over-identification with a god that makes people become cult leaders and see themselves as some sort of prophet. Now, the seed of truth in this lie is that part of what makes religion so valuable to people is this introjection of the God figure can be really helpful. It can give people a lot of strength and resilience because you have this good, benevolent God figure. You absorb it into yourself and it gives you inner strength. But like I said, when taken to an extreme, when over-identifying with a God figure, that can quickly become psychosis. Now, before I go on to the next dangerous lie, why don't I pivot for a minute to talk about something a lot less dangerous? Math. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring this portion of today's video. Brilliant is an app where you learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. If you're somebody who's looking to improve your math skills, either for school or for work, for your professional development, Brilliant can be really helpful. Maybe you need it for your own business. Like I know for me, I picked data analysis lessons so that I can better grasp how to assess my business metrics. But even if you don't need it for school or for work, it's always good to keep your mind sharp and to always be learning new things. So if you're just looking for some problem-solving skills or to keep your mind sharp, this is also really great for that too. Brilliant helps you understand concepts from the ground up with hands-on problem solving and playing around with concepts. It's a lot more fun than just watching lectures, but it's also a lot more effective than watching lectures because we learn best by doing, not by watching others do. Brilliant was created by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, and so forth. So let me run through an example. Let's say that you want to get really good at programming. If you want to get really good at programming using Brilliant, you would get really familiar with Python and start building programs on day one with a drag-and-drop editor. You would learn essential coding elements like loops, variables, nesting, conditionals. You would start thinking like a programmer by writing complex programs to build games and apps. And the reason this is so cool to me is that up until very recently, if you wanted to learn this stuff, you needed to go the traditional education route. But with Brilliant, you really don't need to go to a school or to a coding boot camp for these things. If you want to learn these skills, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. So try Brilliant for 30 days by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking my link below. And if you do that, you'll also get 20% off annual premium. Thank you so much to Brilliant. Dangerous spiritual lie number 3. You need to purge yourself of toxins for spiritual purity. I'm talking about people who say that in order to have spiritual purity or to be closer to enlightenment or to God, you need to do things like fasting, saunas, eating clean, obsessive colon cleansing, eliminating any and all low vibration products like anything that's not natural. Now here's the seed of truth. I'm not a medical doctor, my doctorate is in clinical psychology, but from my understanding of the research, fasting does indeed have physical and mental health benefits when in moderation. Saunas too. I mean, I love saunas. I've spoken about that very frankly. However, it is a myth that they clear out any toxins like heavy metals. That's not what the benefits lie in. Eating nutritionally dense whole foods absolutely has health benefits. And there are a lot of carcinogens and toxins in today's everyday products that definitely accumulate to dangerous levels. So sometimes being more natural is healthier. But here's where I think the spiritual community takes it too far. Overdoing it on any number of these things can be dangerous. For example, if you become overly preoccupied with eating clean, that can quickly turn into orthorexia. Being overly preoccupied with purging yourself of toxins can quickly become obsessive, as in obsessive compulsive disorder. The truth of the matter is that you won't be able to 100% eliminate toxins no matter how hard you try. Let's say that you want to eliminate toxins or these like forever chemicals when you're cooking. Okay. So you say, okay, I can't have a non-stick pan. But then when you use a pan that doesn't have non-stick, you burn the food, and that also contains carcinogens. Or let's say that you want to eliminate toxins in how you drink water. So you try Brita filter, but then you realize the Brita filter also doesn't clear everything, and it's in plastic. But oh, you can't have bottled water because that also comes in plastic. But then you can't have tap water because then that still has heavy metals. You see, like, I'm not saying there aren't some options that are better than others, but there's no way to ever 100% eliminate these toxins. And when we become very preoccupied with doing that, it can become obsessive and pathological. The only way that you'll completely insulate yourself from toxins is if you live in a bubble. And at that point, what kind of life is that anyway? And another thing is that these health risks do not reflect spiritual purity. A person is not less spiritually enlightened just because they eat junk food. The idea that they won't be able to hear God as clearly because they had McDonald's is just not tethered to reality. And I find that sometimes both sides of this argument can take things a little too far. One side denies that there are, for instance, objectively healthier foods than others, and that carcinogens in everyday life are harmful and we should eliminate them as much as possible. But the other side equates nutritional value and natural products to spiritual enlightenment. Both miss the mark. Both take it too far. If you want to meet in a healthy middle ground, you need to minimize these things as much as you can, maximize eating healthy, staying away from toxins, while also accepting that some amount of these things are going to be present no matter what. And if you try to completely eliminate them, it's going to negatively impact your mental health, and it's going to become very obsessive. Anytime I hear someone just going way overboard with talk of toxins or clean eating, I really do wonder about OCD. Dangerous lie number 4. You can control future outcomes through your thoughts alone. The belief here is kind of in line with like law of attraction and manifestation, that everything that happens to you is a result of your beliefs. The seed of truth here is that our thoughts are indeed very powerful. I've shared in several videos how optimists fare much better compared to pessimists, how people who take responsibility for their lives end up in better outcomes than those who don't, how retraining your thoughts can help set you up for more powerful action. The problem is that while we should focus on what's within our control and we should try to think positive, reality testing is not intact if you don't also acknowledge that there are factors outside of your control at play too. I think a healthier belief is just to say there are factors we can control and factors we can't. Let's focus on the ones that we can control. Let's not focus on the ones we can't. But let's also not deny that they do exist. Why I think this lie is so harmful? I think it can make people in difficult situations really blame themselves. Even in scenarios where it was literally somebody else's actions that caused the outcome, right? Like if you're being mugged on the street, it's not your fault. You didn't manifest that to happen because of your thoughts. It was the other person's choices that you have no control over because you're not omnipotent. You're not God again. I think this belief that like we can control anything and everything at every given moment is an unhealthy way of feeling more in control when really we feel like our lives are spiraling out of our control. It's an overcompensation. And again, it gives people this almost omnipotent self-concept that veers into delusions of grandeur that again veer into the schizotypy spectrum. And dangerous lie number 5 is that people lie on a hierarchy of enlightenment, and you shouldn't associate with people who aren't awake like you are. The belief here is that if you're high vibration or high frequency or whatever, you're not a match for people who are low vibration. Usually, interestingly, when people say this, what they mean by low vibration is just a person who expressed skepticism or criticism about what they do. Again, how incredibly convenient, right? Now, the seed of truth in this one is that who you associate with absolutely does affect your trajectory. We have research to suggest that associating with people who are emotionally healthier makes us emotionally healthier. Associating with people who are wealthier makes us wealthier. Or no, I should specify, there's not causality there, but there is a correlation that people have speculated could be causation. There is definitely some level of social contagion when it comes to psychological traits. So we do need to be careful who we let into our circle, because people can either pull us up or pull us down in different ways. But in most spiritual and religious circles, some common themes are compassion, acceptance, generosity. So I really don't know where this New Age belief comes from, that we shouldn't associate with people who are not as good as us in whatever way. Actually, yes, I do. Yes, it comes from narcissism. Viewing people on a hierarchy in terms of people who are superior and people who are inferior is a symptom of narcissism. Narcissists are the ones who categorize people in this way, whereas healthy people acknowledge that we all have worth. So the people who weaponize spirituality to make themselves feel superior to others, babe, that's just narcissism. You're not more awake than the person who criticized you for selling a $30,000 spiritual retreat. I hope that this video was reassuring to any of you who have maybe fallen victims to some of these dangerous lies. I think the moral of the story is that everything needs to be in moderation. As you saw, there is a seed of truth in all of these beliefs that I think resonates with people. But be very wary of people who take a seed of truth and take it so far that it ceases to be tethered to reality. Because that is when you can get things like schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorder, narcissism, losing touch with reality. So these things are very harmful. We need to be careful with the types of content we consume, even when it seems like it's coming from someone who's so enlightened. Let me know what you thought about this, and don't forget to check out Brilliant using my link below. Take care.